What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Friday, everybody. The weekend is almost upon us. I hope you've had a productive week and have a relaxing weekend ahead. For the first time in 25 years, China's urbanization rate has risen by less than 1%, and domestic experts like chief economist at Pinpoint Asset Management, Zhang Zhiwei, say that this downward trend looks to continue this year and for the foreseeable future. This could represent a turning point in modern Chinese economic history. The decades-long explosion in growth, especially in the 90s and in the first decade of the 21st century, was in large part due to massive urbanization rates, or at the very least, was hand in hand with it. Growth and urbanization work together to create a virtuous cycle. Slowdown in urbanization can now have the opposite effect. Less urbanization means less need for housing and infrastructure, both of which, frankly, are at overcapacity in many regions of the country. Less housing and infrastructure means less growth and less demand for labor. This in turn reduces economic pull factors for labor, further slowing urbanization. This week, the National Bureau of Statistics published data showing that China's urbanization rate of permanent residents rose by 0.83 percentage points to 64.72% in 2021. Unofficial data points indicate that this number is likely accurate. This number, like birth rates in recent years, will be very disappointing for officials and policymakers who expected a higher number and who have planned future construction based on that higher number. During the 14th five-year plan, 2021 through 25, for example, Beijing forecast an urbanization rate averaging 1.03 percentage points annually during the 5-year period. Indeed, a report published by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences late last year expressed that the goal was to reach 75 to 80% by 2035. At the current rates, they will not hit that number. As we just said, slowdowns in these trends can be reinforcing, with virtuous cycles in good days becoming vicious cycles in bad days. Some of the factors for the slowdown are short-term shocks. Zhang Zhiwei, the chief economist I quoted above, expressed yesterday, quote, "The pace of urbanization has been trending down since 2015. The migration to cities slowed further in 2021, partly due to the zero-tolerance approach to COVID-19, and as a large part of the service sector has been adversely affected. The slowdown of the property sector likely also played a role." End quote. But short-term shocks can become longer-term trends. A permanent slowdown in real estate construction, for example, could have that effect. The demographic makeup of the rural population of China also cannot be ignored when we think about why the urbanization rate is slowing so quickly, especially when the overall rate is still relatively low compared to developed economies. Large parts of this population are made up of older residents who are relatively low-skilled, having lived through the latter Mao era years when most did not have access to quality education resources. These types of households are less likely to move to larger urban centers without strong economic or other incentives. Household registration restrictions through the hukou system are also a factor. Now, this is the average rate across the country. Some cities are growing and doing very well. Dynamic economic powerhouses like Guangzhou, also known as Canton, Shenzhen on the border with Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Alibaba's hometown of Hangzhou are all experiencing strong and healthy population growth. However, this is just a handful of cities. There are hundreds of other cities that are growing very slowly, not growing, or in places like the northeast, shrinking at an alarming rate. And the migration to places like Shenzhen, Wuhan, Chengdu, Shanghai, Beijing, and others are coming from other urban centers more so than the countryside, so it isn't contributing much to overall urbanization rates. These trends also reinforce geographic wealth disparities, a source of political and social instability and a common issue in China's history. For decades, the government has been concerned with the wealth disparities between the coastal region and the poorer interior. However, in recent years, there has also been an acute disparity forming between a rapidly slowing north and a growing dynamic coastal south. But that is a story for another video. Going back to the urbanization rate, He Yafu, an independent demographer speaking to the Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post this week, expressed the following on the urbanization data. Quote, "Now that the urbanization rate of permanent residents has surpassed 64%, it is not surprising that the rate of urbanization is slowing down. The higher the urbanization rate in China, the lower the fertility rate. China's population will very possibly go into negative growth this year, which would serve to force the government to introduce more policies to boost fertility next year." End quote. Both these long-term trends are pessimistic, however, and very, very difficult to reverse. Okay, let's quickly touch on the outbreaks in Hong Kong and on the mainland before we move on to Evergrande and the housing sector crisis. If you're enjoying the content, please hit the like button. It's a huge help for a small channel like this. And if you're watching for the first time and you enjoy the content, we release one of these every day, so maybe consider subscribing. You'll have the most up-to-date analysis on developments in China. On Wednesday, Hong Kong reached a new threshold of more than 55,000 daily new infections. The day before, the figure was 32,597. Yesterday, Thursday, new cases reached 56,000. Daily deaths are now in the hundreds. Multiple sources report that discussions are still ongoing regarding how to impose a lockdown and the most appropriate time for it, whether to do so soon or after the fifth wave of infections has peaked, and other factors. Yesterday, in response to calls from several experts and infectious disease specialists and others that private hospitals should be opened up to take on more COVID patients, Dr. William Ho Sui Wei, chairman of the Hong Kong Private Hospitals Association, said that private hospitals would soon collapse if such a policy was forced on them. My apologies for my Cantonese pronunciation, by the way. I speak Mandarin but not Cantonese. Financial market moves indicate that investors and international labor are both very pessimistic about this outbreak and what it means for the short to medium term in the special administrative region. Bloomberg's Hong Kong team reports that there were over 43,000 net departures from the city in the last 2 weeks alone, the most since the start of the pandemic. In a bear market scenario, Bank of America analysts this week estimated that this year 2 to 3% of Hong Kong's population could depart each month. Local media report that hundreds of cases have been found among MTR Corporation staff members. These are the people that manage the underground subway systems, affecting those providing train services and maintenance as well as contractors. There is now acute labor shortages for the operation of transportation services in the city. Across the border in the mainland, the country is grappling with smaller sporadic outbreaks in dozens of locations. The strict mainland policy of zero tolerance makes even small outbreaks very disruptive to families and to commerce. Cities affected include Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. Shenzhen has locked down border areas near Hong Kong this week too. It has also launched blanket searches in areas where travelers from Hong Kong are known to stay. There have been reports of residents having authorities do surprise home searches. Caixin, a domestic publication, reports, quote, "Staff have been checking on homes, with some even looking under beds and in cupboards." End quote. Official cases in Shenzhen are in the hundreds, but restrictions are tight. This week, residents in some areas were told that they needed to provide a negative COVID test from the previous 48 hours just to ride the subway. And last up, the Evergrande housing crisis. In the most high-profile warning from a top official regarding the risks to Beijing's property developers' deleveraging campaign to date, Guo Shuqing, chairman of the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, China's chief banking regulator, warned this week that a quote-unquote too dramatic correction in the property sector could damage the economy and said a smooth transition would be more desirable. Speaking at a press event on Wednesday, Guo warned that a large proportion of bank loans are in mortgages because many people, quote, buy homes to speculate, end quote, and, quote, if housing prices fall in the future or something else goes wrong, it will be a huge financial crisis, end quote. This week we learned that in February, the average price of new housing in 100 surveyed cities rose 0.03% from the previous month, after 3 consecutive months of decline. This is according to data from the China Index Academy. However, this price level seems to be completely untethered from devastating sales data we received this week for property developers. China's top 100 developers sold property worth 401.6 billion RMB, $63.6 billion in February, down 47.2%, and an even deeper contraction than the 39.6% decline recorded in January. Property sales by floor size fell by 32% from the previous month in February too, and were down 35% year on year. So this data and the data regarding prices seems to be a little disjointed. During the briefing, Orr said that when he applied for a mortgage from China Construction Bank more than 20 years ago, the approval took 6 months. But now, he argues, banks scramble to give out home loans. Meanwhile, and very much on this theme, this week the large northern city of Zhengzhou, ZHENGZHOU, provincial capital of Henan, HENAN, issued a notice to, quote, promote the healthy development of the real estate industry and form a virtuous cycle, end quote, saying it will, quote, guide financial institutions to increase provisions for mortgage loans, end quote. The relatively poor city also said that it wants to make it easier for people to buy second homes. Very much a red flag, and more signs of slidebacks on efforts to deleverage the housing sector as the pain of slowdown bites. Now let me leave you with this video with a comment from Japanese-owned Nomura economists this week. Quote, we believe the worst of the property curbs are behind us, but regarding the property market itself, we believe the worst is yet to come, due to the massive overbuilding in low-tier cities in 2015 to 2018 and Beijing's strong commitment to most of its property curbs for containing home prices. End quote. Hey guys, I'd love to hear what you thought about some of the updates we covered in today's episode, so throw your comments below. Always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.